She didn't wear makeup. Her dress was plain. Her shoes weren't designer. In a crowd filled with glitz, glamour, and polished smiles, Clara stood like a wilted daisy among orchids. But she didn't care. She never had. Clara was comfortable in her skin, soft-spoken, gentle, and content to blend into the background. What she didn't expect was that on this particular day, at the wedding of her husband's cousin, she'd become the center of cruel whispers, biting laughter, and one of the most humiliating public spectacles of her life. What no one expected was that the man quietly sipping champagne beside her, the one everyone assumed was just a kindly older gentleman, would be the billionaire who would shut the whole event down with a single, devastating sentence. Clara didn't come from money. She had grown up in a small town where luxury meant a meal at the local diner and hand-me-downs from older siblings. She never sought riches or prestige. She worked as a kindergarten teacher, lived a quiet life, and happened to fall in love, not with a lifestyle, but with a man. Harold was kind, unassuming, and wore his wealth like a faded coat, never flaunting it, never letting it define him. He met Clara at a bookstore, where she stood comparing two versions of the same fairy tale book. He joked about dragons and happy endings, and she laughed, not knowing that the man in a casual sweater and jeans owned half the city skyline. Their romance was quiet, private, and real. He never told her the full extent of his wealth until after their engagement. Clara was stunned, but not because she cared, because she didn't. So when Harold invited her to his cousin Elena's wedding, a lavish affair at a five-star estate, filled with celebrity guests, designer gowns, and million-dollar flower arrangements, Clara was nervous. Just be yourself, Harold told her. They'll love you. But Harold was wrong. The moment Clara stepped onto the marble floor of the venue, whispers followed. Her simple light blue dress, handmade by her mother, drew eyes. Her thrift store heels, polished but far from stylish, became the subject of snickers. The women looked her up and down like she was a houseplant someone forgot to water. And then there was Elena, the bride. Elena had always been the princess of the family. Blonde, beautiful, and born into generational wealth, she was used to being the star of the show, and she made sure everyone knew it. She spotted Clara from across the ballroom and raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. With a smirk, she leaned over to her bridesmaids and muttered something. They burst into laughter. Clara pretended not to notice. She stood quietly at Harold's side as he introduced her to extended relatives. Some smiled politely. Others barely concealed their surprise. She's simple, someone whispered, not quietly enough. He could have married royalty. Things escalated when it was time for the seating at dinner. Clara found her name card at the far end of the ballroom, near the kitchen doors, tucked between an elderly aunt and a teenage cousin. Harold's name, strangely, was placed near the family table, right beside the bride and groom. That must be a mistake, Clara whispered. I'll fix it, Harold said immediately, reaching for a staff member. But before he could act, Elena swanned over, her dress glimmering like diamonds. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh Harold, there's no mistake, she said sweetly. We just thought Clara might be more comfortable over here. You know, less pressure. The room fell silent. Clara's face turned red. She forced a smile, nodded politely, and sat down. Harold's jaw tightened. But Clara gently squeezed his hand. It's okay, she whispered. Let it go. But the bride wasn't finished. As the evening wore on, the jabs became more obvious. During a toast, Elena joked about how love should be between equals, in status, in style, and in taste. Her bridesmaids giggled. Someone even raised a glass in Clara's direction. Then came the final blow. The bride stood on the grand staircase for her dramatic bouquet toss. She scanned the crowd, then deliberately locked eyes with Clara. You might want to step back, dear, Elena said into the microphone. Don't want the bouquet landing in the hands of someone who shops at Goodwill. The room erupted in laughter. Clara froze. Her eyes welled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She turned away, embarrassed, humiliated. That was when Harold stood up. Slowly. Calmly. The laughter died down as heads turned. Harold took the microphone from the DJ and looked out at the glittering sea of guests. His voice was calm, almost too calm. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, he began. I came here as a cousin. A guest. A man happy to celebrate love. He looked toward Clara. But tonight, I watched the woman I love, the kindest, most genuine person I've ever met, get mocked, belittled, and disrespected. Not because she was rude. Not because she interrupted anyone. But because she wasn't wearing the right label. Because she didn't fit into someone else's idea of status. He turned to Elena. You said love should be between equals. I agree. That's why I married Clara, Because she's my equal in every way that matters. Her compassion, her humility, her grace, far outweigh all the designer gowns and diamond tiaras in this room. You could have heard a pin drop. I was going to stay silent. I was going to leave with her quietly. But then you mocked her in front of everyone. Publicly. Cruelly. And that, Elena, is where your fairy tale ends. People murmured. Phones were being pulled out. Someone gasped. Harold continued, effective immediately, our family's business ties to the Whitmore Group are terminated. The real estate merger is off. The joint venture on the South Bay project? Cancelled. My name holds 51% of the assets involved. You just lost it all, Elena. Over a bouquet joke. Elena's mouth dropped open. Harold, wait. No, he interrupted. You had your moment. And you wasted it. This wedding is over. Then, to the absolute shock of everyone in the room, Harold took Clara's hand and led her out of the ballroom, leaving behind stunned silence, horrified faces, and a bride who had just watched her entire future fall apart. Outside, in the cool evening air, Clara finally let the tears fall, not out of humiliation, but relief. Harold turned to her, cupping her face gently. You never have to prove anything to anyone, Clara. You're more than enough. I didn't want to ruin the night, she whispered. You didn't. They did. The video of Harold's speech leaked within hours. It was posted anonymously and quickly went viral. Billionaire destroys bride after she mocks his wife, trended for days. Clara's story resonated with millions. Not because she fought back, but because she stayed dignified in the face of cruelty. Offers for interviews flooded in. Fashion brands tried to contact her. But Clara declined them all. She went back to her classroom, to her life of simplicity. She didn't want fame. She didn't need revenge. She had already won, not with money or power, but with love. As for Elena, her family's empire suffered serious losses. Her husband-to-be filed for an annulment just 2 weeks later, uncomfortable with the spotlight and backlash. Her social media turned off. Her public appearances vanished. And somewhere in a quiet house on the edge of the city, Clara and Harold continued their simple life. They planted roses in their backyard. Made pancakes on Sundays. Laughed at silly jokes. And every time Harold looked at her, he saw the woman the world had tried to shame, and failed. Because real class doesn't shimmer under chandeliers. It walks out of a ballroom, head high, holding the hand of the one who never let go.